Glad to be here. So I'm Travis Wright. I'm a senior program manager on the engineering team, and I'm joined today by Sean Christensen, the technical product manager.
So between the two of us, he built it, I helped market it and sell it.
That's right. So he has the more, wait, who's more important? I don't know.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, all right.
mutual.
All right, deal. So today, we are really excited to be able to show you the new System Center Service Manager 2012. We first demonstrated it publicly at the Microsoft Management Summit a couple months ago.
Yep.
And got really good reaction from people on that. How many people have seen that presentation before? A couple people.
All right. People.
So you get to see it again. How about that? If you didn't catch it all last time, you'll be able to see it again this time. So let's just go ahead and get started here.
Wrong button.
Wrong button. Here we go. Other way. All right. So you've heard a lot about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and so on. And there's kind of this new concept coming around now called IT as a service. And IT as a service, if you think about it, is it's really about abstracting away from the end users, the consumers of these different services and applications, how those applications or services are being delivered. So for example, an end user that has an Outlook mail client, it's connected to some Exchange server, he doesn't really care about whether that Exchange server is hosted on premises at a Microsoft partner that's hosting it, or if it's Office 365. He just wants his mail to work. And if there's a problem, he wants to be able to call up the IT organization and have the IT organization solve that problem however that needs to happen. Whether that's calling somebody internally in the Exchange Systems Management group, or calling up the partner, or calling up Microsoft to get that resolved. So IT as a service has some different objectives. First, we want to be able to reduce our costs, increase service levels, have faster time to delivery. We want to be in compliance with governance and industry regulations. And we want to provide more transparency to our users. So let's talk a little bit about how Service Manager helps an organization achieve these objectives of IT as a service. Firstly, you need to define your processes. Service Manager is all about process. There's lots of different process frameworks out there like MOF, ITIL, COBIT, et cetera, that can help you define what your processes should be for incident management, problem management, change management, and so on. Once you've identified what your processes need to be, then it's time to implement them in Service Manager. As you implement them in Service Manager, what we want to demonstrate to you today through a series of demos is how Service Manager enables you to achieve these objectives through automation, standardization, self-service, and compliance. So before we get going on the demo fest here, I just want to go through each of these four concepts and explain them a little bit more in detail. Firstly, Service Manager enables controlled automation, first of all, by having an integrated CMDB. We bring data from Operations Manager, Configuration Manager, and Active Directory. We have connectors for those out of the box today. You can bring that data into the CMDB. We reconcile all that data so that you have a single record about all the different objects that you're managing in your environment. We also have the Opalis integration pack for Service Manager, which will enable you to hook up to other systems that Opalis has integration packs for, like BMC Remedy or HP OpenView and so on, and be able to bring additional data into the CMDB. In Service Manager 2012, we'll introduce connectors for Virtual Machine Manager and Orchestrator, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later today. Lastly, Service Manager enables automation by providing a workflow platform that's based on Microsoft.NET and PowerShell. So you'll be able to author workflows using tools that are familiar to you, like Visual Studio, the PowerShell ISE, et cetera, as well as some third-party products out there like PowerWF. I was just down at their booth just prior to this. Service Manager enables self-service by providing a number of different user interfaces that allow people to get at the data that they need to be able to make decisions, find out what the status of things are, and so on. Firstly, we're going to provide a new self-service portal in Service Manager 2012. It'll be based on SharePoint. This is one of the areas we got a lot of feedback on in 2010, was that the portal itself was not customizable enough. And so we decided to build that now on SharePoint 2010 to leverage all the customizability capabilities there in SharePoint. We're also going to make it much easier to author dashboards and reports in Service Manager because we're going to provide OLAP cubes out of the box. Those reports and dashboards can be accessible through a browser interface by accessing a SharePoint site, for example, using the SQL Reporting Services web front end, or using the Service Manager console. And because it's built on a cube foundation, people can use things like Excel Power Pivot to just hook up to those cubes and slice and dice the data, and in that way be able to sort of self-service their business intelligence needs off the data warehouse that Service Manager provides. And lastly, using something like the Exchange connector, people can approve change requests, reject change requests, mark manual activities that are assigned to them as completed, update incidents, resolve incidents, close incidents, and so on, using various email clients, Outlook, OA, or even your mail client on your phone. Service Manager enables standardization by, first of all, defining your business process in templates. So as you go and you create change request templates or release record templates and so on, you codify the business process as part of those templates. So for example, your process might be, first of all, to release this type of application, we need to have an approval that happens, and then we're going to have a couple of manual activities that are going to happen, and then there's some automated things that are going to happen, and then we need to approve the next stage and so on, and you just map out whatever your process is as part of this template, and then each time you release that application, or you modify it, or whatever it might be as part of a change request, you're doing it in a consistent and standardized way because you're creating those work items from that template. The CMDB also helps you standardize because it helps you standardize your data. You have many different data sources like Ops Manager, Config Manager, Active Directory, potentially getting data from other systems. And when that data is brought into the Service Manager CMDB, we reconcile all of that data into a single master record about a computer or a database or a website or things that you manage. We have a common model that's shared between Operations Manager and Service Manager. So anything that Operations Manager can discover can be brought into the Service Manager CMDB so that it can then be managed by all your different process management tools. Lastly, the service catalog that we're introducing in Service Manager 2012 enables standardized offerings to be made available for end users to request. So we're going to give them constrained choice. When they go up to the service catalog, let's say they want to request a new VM. Okay? You can choose from either a high power VM or a medium-sized VM or a small VM. You don't get to choose every single little configuration parameter anymore because we're not going to manage things at that type of a level. We're going to offer standardized offerings of VMs and standardized computing power options there. So we control the different options that people have and make these standardized offerings through the service catalog. And lastly, Service Manager enables compliance. So compliance is embedded in the processes that you define in Service Manager. As you define your process, okay, we need to have an approval happen for this type of change request, for example. When that change request approval happens, that's logged in Service Manager. So now you're being in compliance with different industry and governance regulations out there. You can embed compliance in your automation. So when we automate something, we do it in a way that's compliant. So that way, every time it happens, it's always being done in a compliant way. The Service Manager Governance, Risk, and Compliance Management Pack that's provided by Microsoft maps a very large library of complex legalese documents about governance and industry regulations and so on into actionable IT control objectives that can then be automated so that they can be automatically tested on your systems to see whether or not you're in compliance with those industry or governance regulations. Okay. Now, before we get going on all the demos, I do want to just sort of take a minute to thank you all for the feedback that you've provided on Service Manager 2010. That's resulted in what we call a list of incremental improvements to the product. These are areas of the product that previously existed in Service Manager 2010, but because of your feedback, we've gone and improved those areas. So for example, we're adding much more granular incident SLA support. You'll be able to have parent-child work item relationships. We've made the Active Directory connector more granular in terms of its criteria. There's more PowerShell commandlets. There's more subscription infrastructure improvements that allow you to trigger workflows and notifications in more scenarios. You'll be able to have parallel execution of activities within work items. And there's lots of performance improvements and bug fixes that we've done in the product as well. So again, just really thank you for all that feedback. Please continue providing it, and we'll try to make the product better than it was in 2010, obviously, and at the same time add a lot of new capabilities, and we'll spend the rest of the time today talking about those. So to start out with, I'm going to turn the time over here to Sean. He's going to demonstrate the new service catalog and self-service portal and the orchestrator and VMM integration.
Cool. Thanks, Travis. So I'm going to spend some time walking you through, talking about what we have improved within Service Manager 2012 for the new service catalog, self-service portal, and its integrations between Orchestrator and Virtual Machine Manager. When we think about IT as a service in respect to these Service Manager 2012, there's three key areas I want you to remember. The presentation of IT service offerings, the workflow associated with those offerings, and the data that underlines each one of those offerings. And I'll break each one of these down. From a presentation point of view, we have introduced a role-based access self-service portal made up of Silverlight web parts hosted in SharePoint. This goes to provide a service catalog to present a standard set of services and request offerings to your end user community that they can consume for themselves. The next area is workflow. And by workflow, there's two aspects. One is the process associated with service request and the automation associated with service request. And this is where I really get excited. Picture this. End users being able to enter a request in a service catalog on their own through a web part in SharePoint and have the automation required to satisfy that request linked to the request such that the only person that touches that entry is the person that requested it. Everything else, start to finish, is completely automated. So with that, inside of Service Manager 2012, we have introduced a service request fulfillment process, which incorporates the workflow activities that go to make up the request offerings that you publish to your end users. So those might be specific instructions, specific activities, multiple parallel activities, however you want to configure it, that can be invoked from within that service request and are either triggered by a business event or a subscription and then incorporate notifications and approvals as part of that overall request. Now, linked to that request is the automation. Now, with Service Manager 2012, we've introduced a connector to Orchestrator and Virtual Machine Manager so that we can actually embed the runbook automation activities within Orchestrator directly into the request offering that we make available in the service catalog, and then map the data values between what we ask the end user for to the parameters that are part of the runbook. So things like, what type of virtual machine do you want to select? What type of operating system do you want on it? How much memory? What database do you want to put onto that virtual machine? Those being requests that you allow a user to select that map directly to an orchestrator workflow that then goes off and provisions the virtual machine. And we'll show you that here in a little bit. The last area is the CMDB, where we store the models and the objects through our connectors to Operations Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, Orchestrator, Active Directory, and Configuration Manager in the CMDB to reference as part of these service requests. Now, the next area is how, from a standardization and compliance standpoint, I'm going to walk you through how this all fits together. One, we have a series of CMDB objects. Our connector framework imports these objects from VMM, from our Operations Manager, from Configuration Manager, from Orchestrator, into the CMDB so we can reference it. And this might be your runbooks, your cloud services and template information from VMM, as well as additional fabric and user information. Secondly, your administrator creates the Service Manager templates that you've heard me talk about all week to capture the necessary attributes of your business process and the role of the actual Orchestrator runbook within that process. So we're starting to capture and bring those two pieces together. The third thing is the administrator then defines the model and the defaults so that we can standardize these offerings. So we pull all the information together, pull all the building blocks together, we start mapping them together, and then we group them together. in a standardized manner. And the fourth area is that the administrator specifies how this information is going to interact with the users, and we create the questions that we want to prompt the user for to get the information that we need in order to satisfy their request. So we're building a bit of a chain here, starting with the end in mind in terms of all the pieces we build together to create our request offering, and we end with what are the questions we want to ask the end user so that we can actually fulfill that request for them. And then lastly is we specify who gets to see it. So within that service catalog, we can tailor the view, what request offerings, what services an end user can see based on their user role that they are mapped to. So we'll walk through a little bit of this as we go. First off, we have the System Center Orchestrator connector synchronizes its runbook data into the CMDB. The administrator uses Service Manager tasks to create a runbook activity with parameters mapped to the properties of that runbook. We then add to a request template the runbook activity that's then added to the service catalog. A user creates a service request from that request offering that we publish, and then the runbook actually invokes the scripts into Orchestrator to go off and actually fulfill that request. And then Service Manager monitors that runbook activity so that you can see where is this request up to. So, as Travis mentioned, Service Manager has introduced a completely new portal that contains Silverlight web parts hosted in SharePoint Foundation 2010 or higher. You can customize it using out-of-the-box SharePoint customization tools, and it's extensible via SharePoint extensibility for hosting additional web parts. And some of the key features is the service catalog is scoped to the user role, and the forms that you see here are customizable and dynamically built. So a couple things to note from a terminology standpoint, and then I'm going to get away from PowerPoint slides and actually show something here. One is a concept of a service request. This is a work item inside a Service Manager that's used for requesting standard IT services. From an ITIL and MOF perspective, the service request is please install or please give me X, as opposed to I have an issue with Y. Not to be confused with a change or a change request, which is traditionally a more complex infrastructure detail-related request. Service requests tend to be lighter, fairly quick. Request fulfillment is the process that is used for managing these requests. A service catalog is a set of service offerings and thus request offerings that IT provides to its users. A request offering is a specific request that IT offers to users that they can then fill out. A service offering is a service offered by IT to its end users that would include one or more request offerings. And then lastly, a technical service is an IT-facing service that contains a series of configuration items and their dependencies, supporting incident and change management scenarios as well as problem management and release. Such as, some examples there, Exchange, Active Directory. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to go ahead and build this out briefly. We start with our service request template. This is the business process that is needed to fulfill my particular request. And the processes defined there on the left-hand side of your screen drive the automation. We then move to defining the request offering that we are going to present to the end user, which turns into a dynamic request on the portal. Excuse me. And then we then group those request offerings into a service offering, which you see on the service catalog. Oops, back one way. Again, each of these are role-based access and contain all the building blocks from within the CMDB to fulfill this request. Those requests then trigger the workflows, the approvals, the notifications, as defined by those processes. So That we already talked about. I'm just going to show it. So here is our new portal. Sitting in, again, Silverlight Web Parts sitting inside of SharePoint. We have a series of SharePoint look and feel down the left-hand side, down the right-hand side. I'll go back to our home screen. And we can take a look at some of the other groupings. What we have here is our cloud services service offering. And then underneath that, we have the available requests for our cloud service that we can grab. So here we have our different categories of service offerings. Cloud services, access requests. We have down here an additional web part that we've added in that you can tailor using out-of-the-box SharePoint tools to actually make this look however you wish it to look. So I'll go ahead and go to Cloud Services. And while this is coming up, we have our Cloud Services. I'm going to go ahead and request a new virtual machine with SQL. Now, I have that request offering. I am able to present help articles or related service offerings with that request. In this case, I'm just going to go to the request form. And here we have a series of questions that we want to fill out as part of this service request. So first thing I want to find out or want to select is, what cloud do I want to put this in? I'll just go ahead and say Marketing Cloud. What virtual machine template do I want to provide to select as part of provisioning this new VM? And I'll say, because I want a big one, I want the gold standard VM template. Now, what SQL version do I want to capture? I'll go ahead and say SQL 2008 Data Center, and then a VM name. What's our session name? 210? Sim 210 Tech Ed. Just so you know I'm not. Put in my VM name, click Next. I can review my options, click Submit, and I'm done. I go back to Home, and I'm back at my main screen here, having my requests. So that's a quick look at what the new portal looks like. Quick question? Okay. This is just a simple. So the question was, would you have an SLA tied, or can you have the SLA tied to this particular service request so they would only see what they get? That could be based on the user role. This is just a really simple demo, actually using pre-CTP code, because we've just only released the CTP version to a select group this week. So we're getting there. So let me go ahead and open up the work items. I'm stealing a little bit of Travis's thunder because you can see a little bit more. And I'll show you that we have a new service request in here, SR1507. Now, if I go back to my little, no, I don't want that one. Oh, I lost it. Oh, well, there we go. I was going to show you, here's 1507, so you know I'm not faking this. Here's the service request that we just created inside of our portal. We have an extensions tab up here showing here are the parameters, the answers to the questions that we just captured from the user. If we look over here on our activities page, we see that we have the predefined activities from our service request, from our service template, that are required in order to fulfill this service request. Now, a couple little icons up here. Notice this approval activity is currently in progress. Hover over, you can see in progress, and this one is pending. We're waiting until my approval is completed, and then I will go and provision that virtual machine. To show you what this looks like under the covers, library tab. If I go over to my library tab inside of Service Manager, I have here under a service catalog showing my request offerings and my service offerings. I'll start with service offerings. Remember on the portal, I had 2 service offerings, cloud services and access. I'll go ahead and open up cloud services. Here's my 2 service offerings. Oh, that's right. Sorry, buddy. Nice little bug we saw with. There. So information related to what my service offering is. I can add in a little JPEG so I can give it a picture. What category do I want to apply it to, and what language do I want to author it in? My description of the service, information related to maybe the SLA, additional information, cost information, further information about this service offering. One thing I want to preface is this is what was available as of MMS. Because this is not released in beta yet, some things are subject to change. And I know the guys are working on making this even look much nicer than it currently is. So just one preface, if you get the beta and go, well, that's not what I saw at TechEd, caveat, yes, it could still change. We then have the related services. If you want to relate this particular service to another one, what knowledge article you might attach to this service offering, and then what request offerings. Remember, a service request is made up of 1 or more request offerings. Here's where we define what are my request offerings I want to add to my service request. In this case, I have 3. Request VM with SQL, which is the one we used, request change, and report a VM-related issue. And then how am I managing this particular service offering? Is it published? Is it in draft format? So that's what the service offering looks like. Let's go to the request offering. And I'll go and open up my request VM with SQL. I bring up my general information, request VM with SQL, give my description. And then I have my user prompts. Now that form that was dynamically generated showing here's the questions I want to ask, this is where we define what those questions are. Question 1, select a cloud. Do you want it to be a required question, optional, or do you want to just display some information for the end user? Maybe a disclaimer of some sort or a particular requirement. Then I select my VM template, select my SQL version, provide a virtual machine name. If I want to add additional questions, I could do that here. I then select the particular request template that applies to this request offering. In this case, request VM with SQL service request template. I select the template object, create VM with SQL, which provides me the specific priorities that are required for that in that request template. So I have a property, an urgency, particular notes, what area, so that's the categorization of that request. And then I'm mapping here the particular prompts that I just collected from my service request, from my request offering that I published to the end user. So here's where I've taken the information that I've asked the end user for, and I'm actually mapping it into the particular service request template that then invokes the orchestrator runbook. So I want to select the VM template, select the cloud, select my SQL version, provide my VM name, and I continue filling all that information out. I have some knowledge articles and my publishing information related to that particular request offering. So that's a quick look at how what we have with the service requests and the request offerings. I want to now show you 2 more things, and then I'm going to approve this and let it run. First one is the integration to Orchestrator. Second is the integration to Virtual Machine Manager. Within Service Manager, we have the connector framework. We are adding with Service Manager 2012 2 additional connectors for Orchestrator and Virtual Machine Manager. The Orchestrator connector pulls in runbook activities into Service Manager and allows us to then map those directly to our request offerings. The Virtual Machine Manager connector pulls in and shows us Virtual Machine Manager service templates and VM information that is stored currently in Virtual Machine Manager. So if we look here inside of our configuration items Wonderbar inside the CMDB, we have a new folder called VMM items. We see our service templates here and our virtual machine templates and our clouds related. So we see our finance and marketing cloud, our service templates, that doesn't seem to come across, virtual machines, and particular VM templates. that we have as part of what comes in from the Virtual Machine Manager connector. If we go back up to our library, we have a new folder here called Runbooks. If you came to the session yesterday that Adam Hall and I did, I showed you how Runbooks come into Service Manager through its connector. You see here we have our particular runbook for Create VM with SQL. If I step out and over to my other virtual machine here, Create VM with SQL, this is inside, at the time, Opalas, now Orchestrator, and I have my two inputs, accept inputs for Service Manager, Create VM template. If I select my properties here, template name, SQL version, cloud, VM name. Here's my variables for the runbook inside of Orchestrator. Sorry, in this case, Opalas. So I have my virtual machine. If I go ahead and bring that up, I see that the variables are part of my runbook, or are referenceable inside a Service Manager. And from here, I can create a runbook activity template that I'll store inside my management pack. Click OK. And this brings up my runbook details and what value I then gets populated or gets called within this particular runbook. So pass the SQL version into a PowerShell script asking for the particular text related to that variable. Now, this is one thing I do know the developers have told me. This is going to look a little different in the beta. But the intent of showing you here is, again, request offering presented to the end user, mapped right down to the actual runbook that executes that request offering. So that's a quick view of what this looks like. Let me go back to the work item. I'm going to bring up my service request. And I'm going to go ahead and approve it. Let's do this. Go ahead and apply it. Click OK. Apply that. And if I refresh that, yes. Might need to think a little bit. Click OK. Go ahead and back up. There we go. So we've approved our request. You see now my Create VM with SQL is now in, it should be pending, it should be in progress. Is now moving, is going to be moving to an in progress state here shortly. It will. I know it will because I did it yesterday. There. So we're now moving to in progress. Now if we move over to Virtual Machine Manager here, connect. Uh-oh. Let me take a look. We will see here in a little bit. Unfortunately, Virtual Machine Manager is not going to show us. Or is it down here? Sorry. Wrong one. Down here. There we go. Create virtual machine. So our Opalas workflow took that information and is generating now our virtual machine. We can see that showing up here in Virtual Machine Manager. And that will go ahead and complete. And I'll probably pass it over to you because it's going to take a little bit to complete. And we then will see the service request close itself out and completed. So that's a view of the new service catalog and the integrations to Orchestrator and Virtual Machine Manager that are coming with Service Manager 2012. So Travis, back to you.
All right. Thanks, John. What do you guys think? Is that pretty cool? Be able to automate things like that with Orchestrator, Service Manager, be able to map things all the way from the end user, inputting some information all the way down, have it automated on the back end. That is excellent. And
we have a question down here.
And okay, I'll get to that. I got to point out here that this is all controlled by process.
Yep.
Right? So you can have approvals, you can have manual activities happening as part of the whole thing. So you can either have fully automated requests or you can have partially automated requests. So that gives you a lot of flexibility there. Yeah.
Where is all this information stored? With the reason being that if I do all this and I build this and I do a great job and then I want to do this in another installation somewhere else,
Yep.
is that something I can take and substantiate a entirely different company, different customer, different...
Yep.
Okay. You want me to do? So the customizations that we make inside a Service Manager.
I want to repeat the question.
Sorry?
Repeat the question.
So sorry, good point. The question was, can I take what I just showed and repeat it at another customer or another location where you have that installed? From a Service Manager standpoint, those can be exported. The definitions are stored in a management pack. So we use a similar architecture to Operations Manager in that we store customizations to and object tailoring to Service Manager inside of a management pack. So all those definitions can be stored there, and you can take that management pack and import it in on another Service Manager server. Now, you also need to have that done at the orchestrator level as well. Export that runbook, import it in the other orchestrator server, because again, we're talking about, you have to do it for each system. So anything to add to that?
I guess the only thing I would add to that is that works for really 3 different scenarios. One scenario would be a customer who's taking those customizations from maybe a test environment to pre-production and finally to production.
Absolutely.
It also works for like a systems integrator partner where they implement this at one customer, export that all out, and then have a repeatable sort of service offering that they can go and do with multiple customers. And it also works for like an ISV partner. So somebody like Provence, which does our asset management solution, can make asset lifecycle management request offerings as sort of content for the service catalog, wrap that up in a management pack, and sell that to their customers. So lots of different options there. All right, yeah.
Creating a cluster VM.
So by cluster VM, do you mean putting a VM on a cluster, or do you mean creating a pair of VMs that is a cluster? So that's just a matter of having a different orchestrator workflow that uses the same set of activities we saw here today, but instead of just creating one VM from a template, you create 2 VMs from a template.
Yeah.
If that can be automated by orchestrator, then you could do that. But this might be an opportunity for where Service Manager kind of shines here, which is mixing automated things with manual things. So if there's some manual configuration, like configuring the cluster after it's been deployed, that could be a manual activity that follows the automated one in the service request. Once the automated one is done, the person that's assigned the manual activity will be notified. They go and do their work and sign it off as being completed.
Any other questions? Yes, sir. In Service Manager 2010? You want to answer that?
So
2010 management
so
packs
the question was, can you take your 2010 management packs and import them into 2012? And the answer to that is yes, you could do that. When we release 2012, it will be an in-place upgrade from 2010 to 2012. So it should be a fairly painless process. All your customizations should be preserved and so on. Okay, the question is, are we planning on doing any changes to the analyst portal? One big change will be that we will be moving that to the new SharePoint-based portal. So the end user aspect of things as well as the analyst portion of it will all be on one portal now. Other than that, in terms of functionality, there won't be any major changes. So one thing that people ask us about is, do you plan to have some sort of web console, sort of a lightweight interface for people that are maybe out in the data center floor or their desk side helping somebody and they just be able to update an incident quickly or something like that. That's something that we're looking into right now, but we don't have a concrete plan for that right now. There is a partner solution for that that's supposed to come out this month. So
yeah.
Yep.
The one thing also to note on that is the current portal and current analyst console, that's all the source code we've actually released and is freely available. We aren't making, correct me if I'm wrong, but we aren't making any new changes to that for 12?
Right, we're not making any changes to the portal that was released with 2010.
Yep.
The portal source code's out there. We're going to see if we can make that continue to work with 2012. That may or may not actually work out. We'll have to see, but the intention is to try to make that work if we can. So, all right. Okay, we'll take one more question, and we'll have to move on. And then we'll be up here for questions afterwards, too. So, yeah, go ahead. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead then and talk about release management. When we talk about release management, as we were planning for this, there were really two major scenarios that we wanted to address. The first one is the idea of taking a line of business application or a service and taking that through the life cycle of putting it into a test environment, finding some problems there, producing a new build, putting that new build into test, verifying that it works. Okay, now we're going to take that same build, since we verified it works in test, we're going to put that into a pre-production environment. Okay, that didn't work. Let's build a new build. Let's put that into the pre-production environment. Okay, that works now. Now let's move it into like a user acceptance testing environment. Okay, that's good. Now we're finally going to move it into production. So managing that whole life cycle of rolling out a new line of business application or service, or updating an existing line of business or application or service. That's one scenario. The other scenario is where I like to use this example of one of our customers who's a IT, more like a hardware manufacturing company, let's say. And they have a hardware manufacturing line that they produce all their hardware on. And that line has to be available as much as possible. Every moment that that line is unavailable for some reason costs this company a lot of money. So what they do is they have a quarterly release window. And during that quarterly release window, they map all of the changes that need to happen to that one moment in time each quarter. And they try to minimize that time window as much as possible by going through a project to sort of plan out exactly how those changes need to happen, in what sequence. They test them all and sort of map out exactly what order things need to happen in to reduce that downtime as much as possible. So that's the second scenario. So what I'll show you now is how Service Manager enables both of these scenarios. So let's see. Where's Alt-Tab? Okay. All right, so here we are again now in the Service Manager console. And what we'll do here is we'll start out, and I want to show you some new configuration items that we've added to Service Manager to help manage releases. The first one is a build class. So we can go in and we can keep track of what builds of what applications we have available. So that way we can know, we've got build 1.0.1567, and that's currently in test. Okay, that one didn't work out, so now we're going to build 1.0.1568. And that one's going to go into test. Okay, that one's good. Now we're going to put that same build into pre-production. So that way we can keep track of exactly which builds we're working with, where they're stored at, and so on. The other object that we've introduced is called an environment. So an environment helps you keep track of a collection of configuration items that represents an environment that you deploy into. So it could be the production environment for the Contoso expense application. And there's a pre-production environment for that, and so on. So we can keep track of which environment each application is in and what build is in each of those environments. So let's go over here now to the work items workspace, and we'll go to release management. We'll create a new release record. Now, similar to what you had with change requests, and also the same thing with service requests now in 2012, you create a release record from a template. So we predefine ahead of time the process for rolling out the Contoso expense application. And that way, each version that we release is handled in a standardized and consistent way. So you can see here that we would capture some information that you'd want to know about the release. We can capture which environments it's going to be deployed into, which services it's about, and so on. We can schedule out the overall schedule for this release. But the really interesting thing about a release record comes on the Activities tab. And the Activities tab is where we define each of the activities that need to happen to roll out this particular release. So here is an example of how we've got a release activity, a review activity that's first here for approvals. And then we've got a parallel activity where we've got a couple of automated activities inside of that would automatically provision a VM via Orchestrator. And so this is an example of how you can use parallel activity now in Service Manager 2012 to execute multiple things at the same time. Now what I'm going to do is show you how you can map a change request to a release record. So we'll go over here to the change request area, and we'll create a new change request. And let's say that in this case we need to update the configuration for SharePoint. Okay, so maybe what we need to do here is we need to be in compliance with some policy and have an indicator on our SharePoint document library for Contoso Expense what the business impact is of that data. And then over here, what we want to do is we want to remove all of these manual activities. We don't need these. These came from the template. And what we'll do is we'll add in what we call a dependent activity. So let's add in a dependent activity here, and we'll call this modify SharePoint config. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the release record and map this dependent activity to the release at the appropriate point in the release cycle there. Okay, so I'm going to submit this now. And then over here, back in our release record, we would add a new activity. In this case, it's going to be a manual activity to update the SharePoint configuration. Okay, and normally we would assign this out to somebody. Let's assign it to myself. Okay, and this will add the activity to the end of the release record process down here at the bottom. So you can see it right there. Now, you can also drag and drop these activities around the designer if you want to reorder things. So I'll just reorder this one so that it happens before the final step there. And you can see things either in this diagram view like this, or you can lay it out using this different view here so it looks more like a tree. That way it's a little bit more dense and easier to read if you've got a lot of activities. Now what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on this activity, and we're going to say link to change request activity. This is the change request we just created, and here's the dependent activity that we had. So we can now link that, and you see that there's a little link icon right here. And that link icon tells us that that's linked to a change request dependent activity. And that way, once this activity becomes completed in the release record, that will mark the dependent activity in the change request as completed. All right, so at this point, we now can go over here to release management, and we'll see our new release record in the UI here. Okay, there we go. Now you can see that a release record starts out in the editing status. And that allows you to modify the release record a lot, so you get your project defined just the way you want it before you actually start it. Once you've got all of your activities in there and you're ready to go, then you change the status of it to in progress by clicking the run task over here. So that will now change the status of this release record to in progress. We can then open this up and switch over to the Activities tab, and we'll see on the Activities tab that just like in Change Management in Service Manager 2010, everything starts out in a pending state, and workflows will be kicked in behind the scenes based upon the fact that this release record has been changed from editing status to in progress. That'll make the first activity in the process go into a in progress state. So you can see this is now in an in progress state. So I'll just open this up now and approve it. And we'll then just submit that change. So at this point, because there was only one reviewer in there, and that reviewer approved it, the status of this review activity will change to completed. And because that review activity status changes to completed, it will change the status of these other activities to be in progress. So we'll give it just a second here for the workflows behind the scenes to run. Okay, so this is now completed. Because that one's completed, this one will now change to in progress. Sorry, what was the question? So the question is this view available to the requesting user on the portal? That's something that's TBD right now. So we'll see how that works out. Not in this build right here, but we're going to see if we can't do that before we release the product. Okay, so here you can see that the parallel activity container here has changed to in progress, and so therefore all of the child activities inside of it have also had their status changed to in progress. Once both of these activities have their status changed to completed, this parallel activity will have its status changed to completed, and then the next activity in the process, in this case another parallel activity, would change to in progress. And this would keep moving on down through the flow of things until the entire release was completed. All right, what do you guys think? Good? Yeah? All right, lots of head nodding. All right, Chris? Question is, how many parallel activities can you have running simultaneously? There's no technical limit to that. I know that we're going to test up to, I think it's 7 levels of nested parallel activities. So in terms of how many peers you could have, we'll figure out some test max number, but it should be fairly large. So.
Is there a question over here? I thought I saw someone. Nope, okay, must have been stretching. Oh, yes, sir. Mm-hmm. If you're using Opalis, I mean, the demos right here are using Opalis and Service Manager 2012, early build of Service Manager 2012. So if you're using Opalis right now, no. When you upgrade, and if you talk to Adam Hall about upgrading Opalis to Orchestrator, to use your existing activities in Orchestrator, it's an export file, import file into Orchestrator, and then you set up the connector here in Service Manager 2012 to bring those activities from Orchestrator into Service Manager.
So there's one kind of significant difference between the way that Opalis workflows are triggered in the Service Manager context in Opalis versus Orchestrator. And the difference is that in Opalis and Service Manager 2010, what you have is an Opalis monitor object activity that is polling the Service Manager database looking for a certain condition to happen that then triggers the workflow. In Service Manager 2012 and Orchestrator 2012, the process is different. We're going to import the runbook definitions into Service Manager as objects in the CMDB, and then you'll create automation activity templates based upon those runbooks, and then include those in service request templates, change request templates, and so on. And then once those activities get instantiated as part of a change request or a service request, and they become active in the process of one of those work items, then Service Manager will actually trigger the workflow happening in Orchestrator through a web service call. So those will be different. As far as I know, workflows that are authored in Opalis to use the monitor object activity should continue to work with Service Manager 2012. So you don't necessarily have to modify the way that those behave, but any new workflows that you create, you'd probably want to try to use the other more direct approach. So, all right.
There's a question over here. Yes, sir. Reporting? We're getting to that.
What a great segue.
What a great segue. Thank you. Checks in the mail.
All right, let's go on to talk about reporting. So let's.
I don't think we could have planned that any better.
I know, that was perfect. All right, so let me get back to my PowerPoint. Where's my PowerPoint?
Minimize.
I got to go one more.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so Service Manager. How many people remember System Center Reporting Manager? Anybody remember that product? All right.
Two in the back.
Yeah. How many
One of them's
people
ours.
have fond memories of System Center Reporting Manager? Oh, nobody. Okay. So System Center Reporting Manager was a product that had a brief lifespan. The idea was to bring together data from multiple System Center products into a single central data warehouse for reporting purposes. You could have kind of cross-product reporting. The architecture of the product wasn't great. There were many things about it that just wasn't appealing. The price was too much. I mean, there was just a lot of things. So when we started on the Service Manager project, one of the things that our team was tasked with was replacing System Center Reporting Manager in terms of the functionality that it provided. So in Service Manager 2012, we can say that we have effectively replaced the functionality that System Center Reporting Manager provided. And we do that by, first of all, making the data warehouse extensible as it is in Service Manager 2010. And we've extended it out of the box now to store additional data from these System Center products. And we bring that data now, not just through the CMDB today, like we do today in Service Manager 2010, we also have direct connections between Operations Manager and Configuration Manager bringing data into the data warehouse. So we're not dragging this data through the CMDB because we don't necessarily need it in the CMDB. We can bring it directly into the data warehouse. It also, because of the architecture that we did there, it also enables you to bring your own custom data into the data warehouse and have really an IT data warehouse. You got custom data you want to bring in from your HR system, from your Siebel type system, financial information. You can bring all of that information into the Service Manager data warehouse. So it becomes not just the Service Manager data warehouse and not just the System Center data warehouse, but it also could become the IT data warehouse that could store lots of other information. The other goal of data warehouse and reporting in this particular release is to enable self-service reporting and dashboarding by using OLAP cubes. OLAP cubes are a way to structure the data inside of what's called a data mart to make it easy to query against that information and easily create reports and dashboards and things like that by simply dragging and dropping your way to the report that you want. And we'll go ahead and show you what that looks like here in just a second. All right, so let's go now to this one.
You need to change the
Okay.
resolution. Drop your resolution down.
That's all right.
Oh,
Okay.
That looks good.
So this is an example of a SharePoint dashboard site that we created off of the OLAP cubes. No code required to do this. Very simple drag, drop, configure type of stuff to be able to create a dashboard on this. And you can see that we're actually bringing in alert data. So we're bringing across alert data from Operations Manager. We're bringing in software update compliance data from Configuration Manager, power utilization from Configuration Manager. And it's all in the same data mart as your data about your incidents, change requests, computers, all that type of information that we already all have in the data warehouse. So you can see here that we can create a simple dashboard. This is our alert to incident ratio. So this is obviously taking data from Operations Manager, the alerts, comparing it to the number of incidents that were created. And we have an idea of our alert to incident ratio over time. And it looks like we're doing pretty good because over time, we're getting closer to a one-to-one relationship as we tune our management packs. Now, there's many nice things about building on top of cubes because you get a lot of functionality sort of for free. Like for example here, let's go and take a look at this chart over here that's mapping out our alerts generated by rule. So we've got 420 of those that happened in February. Let's open up the decomposition tree that SharePoint provides. All right, so now we can start out. We've got our 420 that were started in February. And let's take a look at all of those by priority. Okay, so we've got it broken out by priority. Let's dig deeper. Let's look at this by what management pack these were in. Okay, so we can see that the SQL Server 2008 R2 monitoring MP is actually the one that's generating the most priority 2 alerts. And because we have all this data together in the same place, we can actually correlate this to our incidents. So we could actually look at each of these incidents that are created by classification. Pretty slick, huh? You just start to slice and dice this data, no code required, produce a decomposition tree so we can analyze this data. Okay, now let's take a look at the Service Manager console. Over here, we've got the Data Warehouse workspace. The Data Warehouse workspace adds some additional views in 2012. One of those views is the cubes view. This allows you to see each of the cubes that exist in the data mart. Now we're going to provide a number of different cubes out of the box. We're going to have a work item cube, a computer cube, a alert cube. There's going to be quite a few different cubes that we provide out of the box. These are the ones that we had available at the time that we put together this demo, but we've got this work items cube here, for example. Now, you can, from the console, just click Analyze Cube in Excel, and that would launch Excel and allow you to slice and dice on this cube. But I want to show you also how really anybody can do this without necessarily using the Service Manager console. You just open up Excel, go to the Data tab, click on From Other Data Sources, and say From Analysis Services. Type in the server name. Select the cube that you want to analyze, and click Finish. Now we're adding this into Excel. We've got a Power Pivot that's already dropped into the Excel spreadsheet for us. And now we're just selecting over here which data we want to take a look at. Now, there's lots of different options over here, but I actually want to just filter this down so we're dealing with things about incidents. So we can look at the incident dim here. And let's just drop the number of incidents in our data mart right now is 2,446. All right? Now, one nice thing about SQL Server Analysis Services is that you can define key performance indicators. So let's say that we want to track a key performance indicator, which is the percentage of incidents that are resolved within their SLA. No problem. We can drop that into this chart here, and we can see of all of our incidents, 92.81% of those have been resolved within the target resolution time. Okay, well, that's useful, but I don't really know whether that's meeting our goal or not, so let's just go ahead and, normally when you do this in SQL reporting services, you have to write a lot of custom code to be able to have sort of a status indicator of whether or not you're meeting your key performance indicator, and really it's a very specialized skill and it would take you a long time, or now you can just do this. How about that? All right, that's pretty easy. Oh, let's say you wanted to be able to add grouping to your SQL reporting services. Well, your developers will probably come back and say, well, that's probably going to take us another half a day to a day for each group that you want to do. We don't really want to pay our developers to do that, so let's just go down here and let's add in grouping by service. All right, there we go. Now we've got our incidents grouped by service. We can see whether we're in or out of SLA target for each of these services. Okay, so we just saved ourselves at least a half a day of work there. And now let's go ahead and go in and group these by the component group that's coming from Operations Manager as part of our service definition. All right, there you go. So now we can see for each component group whether we're in or out of compliance with our SLA target. And let's just go ahead and slice it all the way down to computers. All right, so within about, 10 seconds, I just did a day and a half's worth of developer work. Awesome, right? And you can do this ad hoc. You can slice and dice it by anything you want. Okay, now let's go ahead and just save this. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to make this a little fancier here. Why not? Let's just have some fun. We're actually going to make this look like a report even. Let's just insert another row up here, drag this down, insert a report header. Okay, we're looking nice here. Let's go ahead and sort of resize that so it looks like that. And let's take out all these grid lines because that makes it look like Excel instead of a report. There we go. All right, now let's save this. And what we're going to do is we're going to save this into a special folder. And I'll show you why that matters. So we'll call this the TechEd demo workbook. Now we've got our TechEd demo workbook here, and if we go now to the Service Manager console again, what we've done is we've created what we call an analysis library. So you go over here to this analysis library, and this sort of works like Windows Media Player, where you can add in different folder locations that contain these types of Excel reports, which are hooked up to the data mart via the cubes, right? And so I can just add in different folders, and when I do that, these Excel workbooks then become available over here in the analysis library in the reports workspace that my analyst would have access to. So I can go in here now, and I can look at the incident management folder within that library, and I can see, look, there's the TechEd demo spreadsheet that I just created. So let me just close this now, and I'll show you how, just right from here, anybody could open up that workbook and start playing around with it, taking a look at what the current status of it is and so on. All right, now let's do something a little bit more fancy. Let's go back now to our portal here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our analysis library document library, and we're going to upload our file that we just created. Okay. And now we'll do, this is where the power of SharePoint comes in. So we're going to go back now to our dashboard. And so we've got these different web parts on here, right? And we're going to go in here and just using standard SharePoint stuff here, we're just going to edit this page. And we're going to add in a web part. And we're just going to go here to want to add in Excel Web Access web part. Okay, so we add that into here. And then open up our administration panel over here. This is going to drive me crazy. Okay. Oh, I gotta go down here, scroll over. Okay, lots of scroll bars. All right, then up here we're just gonna point to our workbook. Right there. Okay. Now if we save this. So there. Now we've just sort of added our dashboard, our SLA dashboard, to our sort of portal here. All right? Of course, we want to make this the right size and all that kind of stuff. But you can see how quickly I can build up a dashboard. I can build custom reports. I can just drop them out there. And the other nice thing about this is that people don't necessarily even have to have Excel, right? They could just go over here to the analysis library, click on TechEd Demo, and it'll open in a browser. I don't have to have Excel. I can just open in a browser anywhere I want. So very easy to create custom report interfaces to do things like this using this. A couple other things I want to show you. Let's go look at now the Service Manager console again, and let's go to the software. Actually, let's go to Alert Management first. Let's take a look at this workbook here. Okay, now this one's got slicers in it. Okay, so it's just an Excel feature that is built on top of OLAP cubes. So I've got my alert to incident trend and so on. And what I can do is slice this by management pack. So let's see my alert to incident trend for just the Exchange MP. Okay, now let's look at the SharePoint MP. Now let's take a look at the SQL Server 2008 MP, right? So very easily can slice and dice by things. Let's say I want to look at a particular rule. Boom, I can slice it by that. Okay, then down here, we can create custom, basically pivot experiences. So I can go into here and I can right-click on this and I can say additional actions, alert with rule details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill in on those 517 rules in the SQL Server 2008 R2 monitoring MP, and I can see exactly which alerts have been generated from which rules and what their priority was and so on, and I can then filter that data and really just get right at it and get down to the details of things. And lastly, I will show you the software update compliance analysis spreadsheet that I created. Okay, so here we go. We got our software update compliance, and we can then go in and slice this, by the operating system version and so on. We can just add in basically any sort of thing we want. So we've got operating system version there. We can see what compliance we are for each software update, grouped by whatever we want. The flexibility is here to just slice and dice the data any way you want. So very flexible way to use OLAP cubes to do custom reporting without having to write a lot of T-SQL code or fancy SQL reporting services reports. Now, there'll still be a need to do that in some cases, for sure. So don't fire your SQL reporting services report authors just yet. You might find a need for them still. But a lot of the self-service scenarios are going to be easily achieved using these cubes and tools like Performance Point on SharePoint and Excel Power Pivot. And lots of other tools out there that are designed to analyze data using cubes. All right, so with that, we will wrap it up, and we will have time for questions up here. But I do want to tell you a little bit more about kind of the roadmap for things. This is just, again, sort of a high-level view of everything that we're providing in Service Manager 2012. The roadmap is that we just released yesterday, actually, the community technology preview to our TAP customers and partners. That's not a public release, but just to let you know that we are far down the path here. We have 20 of the 25 improvements are now code complete and checked in, and we just have these last few left to go. That's mostly service catalogs, service requests, incident SLA, some things like that we have left to finish up. There will be a public beta that will be available in Q3 of this calendar year, and I'll tell you right now that's not going to be July. It's going to be more towards the end of that. But we do plan to have the release out around the end of this calendar year. So that'll be the RTM date that we're targeting. And we really appreciate everybody coming out to the session today. Please do fill out the evaluations, and in those evaluations, let us know what you liked that you saw today, what you didn't like, what we can do to improve it. And definitely please download the beta and try that out and tell us what you think of that as well. And we'll be available up here for questions. So thank you very much for coming out to TechEd and to our session. Appreciate it.